Richard Kirby is an executive career consultant who is passionate about helping executives succeed in their careers and small business owners succeed in growing more profitable businesses. Richard has a BS in electrical engineering and is both a certified management consultant and a board certified coach. Richard has a unique combination of analytical and creative talents that allow him to successfully coach key executives and individual business owners, drawing upon 30 years of corporate management experience and 19 years in his consulting/coaching practice. He has held management positions in engineering, human resources, and sales in companies ranging from a Fortune 500 to a pre-IPO entrepreneurial startup with 30 employees. Obviously, Richard is a big believer in networking, and I consider him the go-to person on networking and how to improve your networking skills. So please welcome Richard Kirby.
Thank you, Jim. I appreciate that. Yeah, networking is probably my my most interested topic when it comes to career and job search, because to me, that's the way you get interviews. That's my second favorite topic is interviewing, because once you get an interview, you don't want to screw it up. So if you're doing your networking well, you're getting interviews. And if you're getting interviews and doing that well, you're getting offers, or at least finding opportunities and exploring opportunities. And that relates to job search, but also in terms of consulting. Really, you know, if you're looking for a consulting gig, you're looking for a company to hire you as a consultant in general. I consult with individuals in the career space. So in that environment, I'm really looking for an individual to engage me. But most of us as consultants are looking for a company to engage us. So whether it's an interim executive role, a consulting gig that has a certain beginning and end point, or a job that you hope will last quite a while if it's a good one, the principles of networking, I for sure apply to succeeding in all of those areas. So that's what my topic is about today. So some of you that's seen me talk before know that my most famous philosopher that I like to quote, a modern philosopher, is Yogi Berra. And I believe that Yogi Berra has gone down in history not only as the most successful catcher in Major League Baseball of the 20th century, who won, I believe, 10 World Series, but also as a philosopher, because he said things like this: in theory, there is no difference between theory and practice. In practice, there is. So we can sit and theorize about what works and what doesn't work in networking, but when you go out there and do it, when you practice as in doing it, I don't mean practice as in rehearsing, but when you practice as in going out and doing your networking, you'll see kind of how well it's working. And so I assume all of you come into this meeting with some perspective on how well your networking is working. And my goal here, my why, as Simon Sinek would say, why I'm here today, is to help you identify things you could do better, or start doing, or stop doing, to make your networking better. So some of you were on the call earlier and you heard about briefly about my story of networking to get a COVID vaccination. So I got my vaccination by calling my primary physician multiple times and saying, why don't you have a list of patients so when you get vaccine, you can schedule people for vaccinations? And you might call that sort of the networking by continually being visible to someone. I was able to get scheduled because my girlfriend is not that's not her physician. The alternate route that was taken to get her one was I have a really good friend. He would be in my top 20 friends list. So your top 20 friends list will tend to help you if they can. So I got an email from him, hey, don't spread this around, but here's a place that you can get a vaccination. And in order to get it, you need to say so-and-so referred me. So he gave me the name of a person to use to start the conversation. Within an hour of my email, we got a response back, and within a couple of hours, she was scheduled and she got the vaccination within 2 or 3 days. And compare that to what I was doing previously, which was going on the internet trying to get an appointment, which never happened. So before I get into networking, I want to put it a little bit in perspective. You know, some of you, if you've lost a job, or maybe you're a consultant and 2020 kind of killed, I heard 1 or 2 people comment about their consulting practice going down because of the effect on clients. Whenever we have sort of a shock to our system, our income, or career situation, this is the cycle that people tend to go through. And I just have some bullets on here about how I help people support and confidence in the beginning stages to get them out of the negative and begin to believe in themselves and think more positively. And then eventually what I want to do is eliminate if you think of it in terms of networking, eliminate the experimentation, shorten their learning curve, and accelerate their effectiveness so that they get doing the right things and more of them sooner to produce the desired results. So it's really about getting from A to B sooner is why you would, in my case, why a person would hire a consultant in job search. Sometimes as a consultant, you're not necessarily trying to do things faster, but you want to do things better. So what is your why for being here today and for looking at being a better networker? These are some of the reasons you might find networking of value and want to get better at it. And I hope that something you pick up today will help you achieve one of these goals. It's a payoff for you. But maybe the big why from a bigger perspective, not just how you look at it from your perspective, but from the bigger perspective, these are reasons maybe to get better at networking. Because we all know, we've read the literature. When I started coaching 19 years ago, they were saying this, and they're still saying it today, 19 years later. 70–80% of jobs are obtained through networking. And getting a job or getting a client or things like that in consulting are similar potential functions. So the takeaways I have for you today, I would like for you to be able to define better who are the best people with whom you need to network, choose more effective venues, where do you spend your time, establish productive agendas when you are spending your time actively in networking. How do you define what you're going to do? In business, you don't want to have a meeting, call a meeting. We're calling a meeting, everybody shows up and you're an executive or a leader or a manager. And then they go, okay, what's the meeting for? He says, well, let's just sit around the table and talk about this. Yeah, they do have blue sky sessions, but in networking, blue sky sessions are good for information. And occasionally you may need one of those. They really don't get you to your end result very fast most of the time. Set goals and measure results. I find many people in networking don't really want to put a number or a qualification in terms of how they're doing with their networking. They just kind of like that good or bad feeling and what's their gut telling them. And then as a result of these things, hopefully identify weaknesses in your current networking so things will get better. So, the best people with whom to engage. We all have, as you've heard before, especially for those of us that are seasoned executives, we all have a mental Rolodex. And so who should you engage with? Well, you're going to hear this more than once from me. It's okay to engage with people, go to a networking group, maybe to go, I've volunteered at RUMC for over 15 years, it's mentioned. It's okay to go to an alumni group. It's okay to go to a C3G meeting or are a professional society meeting or a industry meeting like manufacturing or whatever. But in my world, you need to be in front of the people that are at the top of your list. And so what I tell clients is make a list of your top 20 contacts. These are the people you need to start with. So that's like point one. Where do you start? Or even if you're in the middle of your networking, I would say, consider stopping what you've been doing and start doing this. And how do you define who are your top 20 contacts? I view them as the people, not who you know, like, and trust, but who know, like, and trust you. So people may like you. That's great. It's nice that you're popular. People may know you, although they usually don't know what you do, even if they're your next door neighbor, really, even if you've had 5 conversations and cookouts with them. And trust takes a while to build up. So in networking, the best thing is go to the well. The well for you is the 20 top people who know, like, and trust you versus maybe going out and talking with people or Zooming with people that really don't have a lot of time to devote to you or attention. Number 2, more effective venues or organizations. I've touched on this before. I'm not much for the teaming mass, anonymous, never met you before, good to meet you kind of networking. Now, you will have to do that in your networking, but if you start with the people who really know, like, and trust you, then they will make introductions. They will scan their Rolodex. Who do I know in manufacturing? Who do I know in marketing? Who do I know at one of these companies? And of course, the thing I do not have in this material, there's other pieces to this, but I would always want to have a list of at least 50 prospective consulting clients or companies I'd want to work for when I go meet with that person. Because if you hand them a list of 50 people or companies and say, do you know anyone on this list? Or do you know anyone in these industries? You will get referrals. And the end result of what I'm talking about here is getting referrals. It's not, let me think about it. Gee, I'd really love to help you. Let me get back to you. Send me this information and let me look it over. You want to close, as they say in sales, always be closing. You want to close this person on who can they introduce you to that will move you forward in your networking. So third, a productive agenda. So again, you don't call a meeting without an agenda, or at least that's when I started with a Fortune 500, it's actually a Fortune 50. And we went to meetings all the time. Some of you may have heard of the book, Death by Meeting. And corporations have a tendency to wear you out with meetings. What I always wanted to know in a meeting, and I've carried it over to my networking, is 3 things. 1, who called the meeting is responsible for keeping it in order and keeping it on agenda, that if things are not going the right way, we can look at them and say, hey, we're off track. Help us get back on track or whatever. 2, what is the agenda? And 3, when do we finish? I always like to know, I was known for getting up and leaving meetings when the person running it was doing a poor job of facilitating the meeting and just ran on and let people run over at the mouth and one thing and another because they weren't focused. So I can't tell you how much it would be important to you. You called the meeting, hey, Peter or Carl or Jim or whoever, I'd like to have some time with you. Let's get on a Zoom call. You obviously need to have the agenda. A simple 4-piece agenda that I work through with clients. The bullet points are, 1 is the warm up. So if I'm meeting with Jim, every time I meet with someone, the first part of the meeting is about them. Jim, what's new? Did you get some new recruiting clients? How are your searches going? What's new with your wife's interior design business? How's this going? How's that going? So hopefully in your top 20, you know enough about them to engage them in the beginning of the meeting. This is what I call the warm-up, step one. If you are a person who's only looking out for you and you really don't, I'm going to be harsh here, you really don't care about other people, you're really only in it to show up to get blood out of the victim here in your networking, then you don't really do this, or you don't want to do this. And maybe you're a nice, very nice person. On the other hand, you just don't think about it. But this is kind of like softening the person up. So they're going to demonstrate that you actually care about that person. They're on your top 20 list, or you've been referred to them and you want to demonstrate to them. So step one is warm up. Step two is really getting into what do they need. And this is the reverse. It's not reverse psychology. It's just logical human psychology, I believe. You know, if Jim, I'm looking for, what can I do for Jim? What kind of client is Jim looking for? What kind of interior design jobs does his wife do? Whatever it is, how can I help him? So step two is really the how can I, answering the question, how can I help this person? Step three now, at some point, it's got to get to me. And I'm here because I also want to get something out of this meeting. So if I've identified how I can help you in step two, you're going to be much more receptive. I don't see this as a manipulative device. It's simply a human psychology method of kind of transacting not just a conversation, but some actual business results out of the agenda. So step three is, here's how you can help me. You know, here's my list of 50 companies. I'd like to meet somebody at an executive level in any of these companies you might know, or in the industries that they represent. Who do you know? How well do you know them? Could you introduce me? Would you feel comfortable introducing me? How would you suggest you introduce me? Could I give you some advice on how you might introduce me? I don't mean to offend you, but I've found sometimes when I get to introduce that key things are missing to maybe motivate the person to talk with me or meet with me. So that's the third step, identifying people who can help you that you want to make contact with, and establishing a good feeling that it's going to get done in a time frame and it's going to get done well. I have a sheet I use, which I call the 11 levels of a networking referral. And down near the bottom of the list, and they go from worst referral to best referral. So when I talk about goals, if you want to think about a quality of a referral, you can actually measure the quality of the referrals you're getting by looking on this chart and seeing, okay, they said, hey, Carl would like, I'm going to introduce you to Carl. I think, you know, you and Carl would get along. Carl's in your industry. He's a senior executive. He may not have a job for you, or a consulting gig for you, but he probably knows other people or other needs out there in the business world in Atlanta. I want to measure how good of a referral am I getting? And then last, so first step is warm up. Second step is how can I help them? Third step is how they can help me. Fourth step is kind of a summary and wrap up. So I always like to repeat back to the people, okay, so as a result of this, here's what I'm going to do. And then if they don't chime in and say, yes, and here's what I'm going to do, then I recount to them very gently and politely and not in a pushy way. And as I understood you right, I think here's what you said what you would be willing to do, and get confirmation of that. That's step four. So that's the 4 steps of a networking agenda. And then set goals and measurements. A goal each week. I don't know how you like to operate. Weekly is generally good for my clients. How many group meetings or Zoom calls like this? This would be sort of a group meeting, of course. How many of those are you going to have? Hopefully those are useful calls and valuable on your time. How many new contacts am I going to be referred to? And how many one-on-one meetings am I going to have? And you could go a little further and say, of those new contacts, what's the average level of quality of referral am I getting? I have an engineering degree. I'm a little bit of an odd person in the career field because I come from an analytical background. And then mid-career, I went into sales. And so, as some of you might describe, I sort of had to take my head and turn it 90 degrees sideways and put it back on my head or on my body or whatever to convert from being an analytical engineer to a people-oriented salesperson. And both of these things are required in job search and getting clients, I believe. So setting goals, you can literally sit down every week and say, here were my goals. How did I do? And most all of you have a lot of management and executive and leadership experience. You wouldn't want an employee working for you that didn't understand what their goals were. I don't think you'd want an employee who you couldn't really quantify their results. There may be a few positions like that. You want to know that the books get closed by this date and when I'm going to see the financial reports. You want to know how many prospects did the salesperson get in front of. You want to know how many orders came in the door for what amount of revenue. As an executive or manager or experienced professional, you need measurements for your people. And likewise, you're really being a little bit of a slacker if you're out there doing your job search and you aren't measuring your own results. So what results might you get? Oh, let's say I want to get one new referral. If it's for a job, it would be in a company or a position that I'm interested in. If you're a consultant, it would be, as I put here, maybe a referral partner. So who's a good resource for you? So if you're a consultant, who are your best gate openers or referral people? Maybe if you're in job search, you want to get a referral to a company, get one new client, or put out 3 proposals, or get 1 job interview scheduled. So these are examples of activities at the top, hopefully generating actual results at the bottom. So what I've talked about is who do you want to network? Where do you want to start? Who are the people you need to be in front of? Your top 20 list who know you, like you, and trust you. Where do you want to do it? I've been volunteering at Roswell United Methodist Church in the job seeker group for close to 15 years. And I always tell people, this is not the place you want to come to network. It is called job networking, but this is a group of people that you don't know that you're attempting to, quote, network with, unquote, and that doesn't work. So figure out who are the best people to network with and go out. And in this case with COVID, you may have a positive attitude. Oh, now with COVID, we can do everything with Zoom. I don't have to get in the car and drive and coordinate all that stuff. All I have to do is get a Zoom call set up. So you have the ability from a positive standpoint to get in front of a lot of people every day and certainly every week. For my clients, I suggest you need to have a one-on-one session, at least 30 minutes with at least 10 people a week. You won't start out with 10, but to build up to that. And the way you do that is by getting referred to new people from the people who care about you. Then have an agenda, have goals. So I'm hoping what I've talked about so far, I want to open this up and get into question and discussion. I've left plenty of time for that. Kept my presentation pretty short, and I appreciate y'all's attention so far. But we were looking to so far to identify weaknesses in your current networking by defining the best people, choosing the right place and who to be doing it with, establish an agenda and guide the interaction, and set goals and measurements. I guess what I would like to say now, I'd like to take a break at this point. I have a couple more slides, but what I'd like those of you, unmute yourself. I can't really see everybody unless Jim can to see hands raised and stuff like that, but maybe just unmute yourself and jump in there. The first person wins. And give me a comment about something you're going to start doing or stop doing in your networking that you think will help you. And if you have a question related to that, feel free.
This is Peter here, and I know I spoke to Richard there a week or so ago, spent some time with him, and I think what I got out of that call was obviously just to try and work on the networking, and I actually spoke to Jim as well, and I picked 2 or 3 other people from my network, and it's incredible the way it's all mushroomed within the last 3 to 4 days. I think I've probably got 15 new contacts, the people that I have reached out to me to talk to. And it's, people in accountancy firms, people in industry, there's a myriad of people that have reached out, so I'm trying to put those all in my calendar over the next week or so. But it's incredible when you really think about it. And what some of my friends, buddies have let me do as well is kind of look through their connections. And they say, why don't you pick 4 or 5 people that, you would like to talk to or whatever, and I'll put you in touch with them. And that's the way that it's worked as well, is people opening up their connections. That if you reach out to them, pull out 4 or 5 names, I've had a lot of success with that, with the 3 other people that I've met, as well as Jim over the last week or so, So.
Well, that's fantastic.
But it's really powerful. It's incredible the way it, if you pick the right people to talk to.
Well, to your point, Peter, big plug for LinkedIn, because LinkedIn makes it so much easier to, plan out your networking activities. And so to that extent, I really recommend that if you're not a paid member, at least on I think it's the premium level is the first one.
Yeah.
It's a very, modest cost to provide a tremendous amount of value. And I use it extensively for executive search, and just very useful. Also, LinkedIn makes it a lot easier for recruiters, whether they're internal or external, find you if they've got an assignment they're working on.
Yeah.
So,
and even there's a role that I've noticed over there the last week or so as well, and I had no connections there, but I was able to work through a distant connection to be able to get myself towards the CFO, which is so I'm waiting to kind of hear what's going to come out of that, but you're just using the power of networking and trying to get it hooked into the CFO. So.
Well, thank you, Peter. I appreciate that comment. And so, that when I showed that curve at the beginning and I talked about shortening your cycle, I mean, the thing I do at the front end is get people doing things that work sooner. And really the sooner you get started is one aspect of making your job search better. And then what Peter has talked about and what I'm talking about in this presentation is primarily tactical. How do you get this done? Now, the next layer of all of this is strategic, which is how do you get the introduction? How do you get the best possible introductions? How do you use the introductions? How do you leverage those introductions? Now you're getting into more, not just the tactical of how do I get introduced to people, but the strategic of how do I get introduced to the right people? How do I get introduced properly to the right people? What do I do with the introduction once I get it? So there's layers of this, and the better you are naturally at this, the better results you get. The more people maybe need some nuance and strategy, then you have to, improve and develop in order to get results. Because if, for example, Peter, if you get these introductions and they don't, and half, this person, all of theirs were flubs and didn't go anywhere. And this other person, maybe all of theirs were great and they were fantastic and made you real progress. It can be because the first person simply did not make the introductions well. And many times people do the easy thing. Here's their name, call and tell them I told you to call them. That's down at the bottom of my 11 levels of referrals. It's not really hardly a referral. It's sort of, I heard an ambulance go chase it. Maybe somebody in there's injured. But at the top of the pyramid of referrals is, Peter, I'd love for you to meet Carl. I just use them because they're on my screen. Peter, I'd love to introduce you to Carl. Let's figure out a time. Let me get with Carl. Let me see when he's available. Then I'll check on your schedule and we'll get our 3 schedules together so we can get on a Zoom call together and I can make a personal introduction to Carl so I can warm him up and he'll be more receptive to helping you. That's toward the top of my quality of referral scale. So it is important, as I said earlier, that you've got a great start there, Peter, of getting referrals. And then the key is to determine the quality and make it the best possible referral you can without being overbearing to the point to where the person goes like, Peter, I don't have all day to help you, man, you're going to have to do some of this yourself. But that's why you start with your top 20 people, because they'll go the extra mile and they'll make the extra effort. Who else has another comment about something to start doing or stop doing?
Is anybody here on Clubhouse now? Do you know what Clubhouse is?
Great question. Yeah.
Clubhouse is a new social media disruptor. It is all voice, and people are connecting from around the world on Clubhouse. If you go to our website and look up Clubhouse on the blog, I wrote 3 blogs about it. But people, you can tell if you meet people on Clubhouse, they're real people because you're having a conversation with them. And there have been a couple Clubhouse rooms where they're talking about LinkedIn bots. So, we've been chatting about how to solve this problem because I teach LinkedIn. Just so you know, I put a link in the chat. There's 9 hours worth of LinkedIn training for free. I get paid by the library. It's free to their patrons and it's all online. So.
And then the note about Clubhouse, so it's invitation only, correct?
Yes, it is, but you can go to the app it has to be iPhone or iPad. It does not work for Android.
No Android.
And you find the black and white picture of the dude with the fro, and that's the right app. So you put your request into the app with your real first name, real last name, and you can either use your first and last name as your social media handle, or if you have a business handle, you can put it in. So I didn't get an invitation. I just put myself in, and like within no time at all, I was I was in, and I told my daughter about it, and she did the same thing. I do have some invitations if anybody is curious about it.
So I want to get back to what I'm preaching though. What I'm preaching is network with the people who know you, like you, and trust you. So in your example, Donna, obviously a person who sends you an invitation on LinkedIn that you don't know from Adam and they don't know you from Adam is not a person I would spend any time networking with unless they could give me a reason to devote some time to them. So let me give you a couple of examples of networking situations. So first or second client I had when I started 19 years ago was a CFO who had worked with the biggest job he'd ever had was CFO of a $200 million private company. He did this 19 years ago. Who's your top 20 contacts? You need to network with them. He went through his top 20 contacts and he wasn't making the progress he wanted, and he was frustrated. So I asked him the coaching question, which is why people have coaches. So who have you not contacted because they're not on your list that should be on your list? And he thought for a minute and he said, well, when I was CFO of the $200 million company, I worked directly for the president and CEO. He's not on my list. And he's looking for a CFO job. And I'm like, so why isn't he on your list? Because I don't like him. So you're telling me that he's not on your list because you don't like him? Yes. Does he like you? Oh yeah, he loves me, because basically he'd sit out on Lake Lanier on his boat, and when he was goofing off, I was covering for him back in the office. So I was like, I was his gopher. I did whatever he needed. I made him look good, all that. Oh, he loves me. So the next question, what's coming. So you're telling me he loves you, he likes you, he would help you, but he's not on your list because you don't like him. And there was about a 5-second pregnant pause. And he said, I guess I should call him, huh? Now, this is a CFO of a $200 million company. But yeah, I would if I were you. He called him. That guy had gotten a call from a recruiter who was trying to fill a CFO role. Within a week, he had an interview. And within 3 weeks, he had a job making 75% more money than he made on his last CFO job, because it was a $1.2 billion public company. And he had never been CFO of a public company. And for those of you that are in finance, you know what that means. It's like, how would you ever get a job with no experience in a $1.2 billion public company? That's the power of networking. I could sit here and tell stories all day long of things like that. I made an introduction to a guy who was wanting a sales job in international sales, in export or import. I said, I know a guy who used to work at the biggest exporter in Atlanta. He doesn't work there anymore. He has his own import-export company. You ought to go have lunch with him. I'll introduce you. He went and had lunch with the guy. The guy says, I can't hire you. My company's small. I don't need you, but I can introduce you to the head of sales at this company I used to work for that's the biggest exporter in Atlanta. Wow, that'd be great. I'm not going to go into all the gory details of what happened, but basically, in a nutshell, he got an interview with the head of sales of this $600 million company a week or so later. And within a couple of weeks, he had a job offer. And eventually he was in Europe running the Middle East and Europe for this company sales, making a gazillion dollars more than he ever made before. That's the power of networking. So I want to wrap up here, because I know we're getting near our time, but I hope in giving you a couple of vignettes, you get an idea, and certainly from the comments that have been made about networking, the idea that Peter, he contacted 3 people, he ends up with 15 introductions. I hope this motivates y'all to think about. But as I said earlier, what we've talked about so far is the tactical part. Some of the more strategic parts that you may, if you follow the tactics I've given you and it's not working, you need to look deeper into why it's not working. Because I can guarantee you this does work. There may be 100 other ways to do it, but I know what I've told you works. So you may have poor technique. That would be number one, how you handle the introductions and referrals and stuff. You may be aiming at the wrong industry or job role or client in the case of a consultant. You may have what I'll be politely call a suboptimal attitude. And trust me, people can see your suboptimal attitude if they're perceptive in the first 30 to 60 seconds of your conversation if you're talking. You may be self-centered, the taker, as Donna mentioned, and not a giver. You may lack commitment to what you're trying to do. You give lip service to it, but you don't have the commitment, and that usually ends up with a lack of effort, a lack of focus I didn't put on here, a fear of success. It sounds weird, but there are people in the world who have a fear of success that's holding them back. Or maybe you just have a weak support network and you need a better one. So there are layers within this, but get the strategy, the tactical part going first. So what I want to end with is the idea is, do you want to just take chances in your network like Celine Dion? And, you're just kind of out there shooting from the hip, don't really have a process, you're not measuring things, you're not holding yourself accountable and different things like that? Or do you want to have, instead of taking chances, be betting more on a sure thing of what's going to get you the networking results you want? Any residual questions Jim can tell me about time? I think we still have a little time depending on how you want to run it, Jim, but I do have a book. It's available on Amazon and barnesandnoble.com as an ebook. And I'm offered to you, anyone who wants to email me and say, send me the networking chapter, I'll send it to you free. And I'd offer anybody on the call, if you want to schedule a time and say, here's the biggest problem I've had so far. Can we talk about it? I'll give you a 90% shot. I don't say 100%, 90% shot at the end of the 15 minutes, you'll have a solution to what your biggest problem was. And I'd offer to help you with that. And there's my contact info. So Jim, do we have time for any other comments or questions, or how are we doing?
We do. We've got a little bit over 10 or 12 minutes. So if there's anything anybody wants to add or question. One thing that I would say, Richard, is, the other side of the equation is, if you want to be a good network and be in good standing with your network, then if somebody refers somebody to you for help and networking, make sure you, follow through, talk to that person and provide whatever help and support you can, because that's just another definition of a taker. If you're only working in one direction, then you're going to be cut out of some very powerful networks.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because that is true. Pay it forward, or whatever you want to call it. The way you get those top 20 relationships is by doing things like that over time. And I had someone contact me this last week. This is the reverse example that Jim just gave. And they said, I want to get on a 3-way Zoom call with you and this person I'm trying to help, because I think you have a big network in Atlanta and you could probably help them. And I got on the call and they explained what they were looking for, what kind of job. At the end of the call, I mentioned it during the call, and I recapped. I practiced what I preach. I said, well, here, I have 3 people I think you should meet. This was an HR person. So they were looking for an HR generalist job, or HR business partner, really, if you know HR. And I said, this person was the head of SHRM, Society for Human Resources Management, for Atlanta for a couple of years. Their person that works for them was also head of SHRM in Atlanta for a year, and as well as HR consultants. So I introduce you to this person, and here's 2 other people. Within 24 hours, I introduced them to all 3 of those people, and I did it in a way to motivate the people to talk to them and try to help them. So that's the pay it forward that Jim's talking about. You need to be doing that all the time, whether you're looking for a job or not, in my opinion. Other questions or comments?
Yeah, Richard, I'd like to add one. One of the things that I see people doing with networking sometimes is say, okay, well, you can reach out to this person and use my name. And to me, that really, I don't do it that way. I'd like to do either the email introduction or the phone call, but I think sometimes people think that's helpful. It's like, hey, well, say so-and-so told you to contact, and I don't think that necessarily works. What's your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. You're getting into my scale. I was going to see if I could find here. So yeah, so my thought is, when I give somebody this document, and I say, here's the 12 shades of a referral, a career networking referral. And number 2 is, I don't know if you can see that. Maybe I can make my screen bigger. Can you read number 2? Referrer gave referral your contact info and asked them to call you. Level 3 is referrer gave referral your contact info and gives you the referral's info and suggests you call them. That's the example you gave me. So I would say that's a level 4 out of 11 for a referral. So my minimum requirement that I recommend to clients is a level 7, which is you coach the referrer on how the strategy for how to make the introduction for you. They make the introductory call or email if it's strong enough. They give you a testimonial and they ask the referrer to meet with you, or in this case, in the COVID world, to do a Zoom call with you. And here's an example. As you suggested, I called Jane Doe, the contact. This is the person who you're trying to get to refer you. The contact we identified when we met. I told her about you and put in a positive word. I told her that she would enjoy meeting you, and she agreed to meet with you for coffee. This is pre-COVID. And I recommend you call her later today while this is still fresh in her mind. Here's her phone number. So that's a 7 as compared, as you said, Doug, what I would call a 3 or 4. I don't like those. When clients get that, I recommend that's not a good referral. You need to coach the people so they give you a better referral.
One other comment, Richard, you talked about 70% to 80% of jobs are done through networking. What do you see on the other side of it? Do you see employers, and I know Jim hit on it a little bit looking into LinkedIn, but do you see employers using the same strategy of networking to hire people?
Well, let Jim talk from his perspective. Obviously, you know, this is the real world. Okay, let's just be brutally honest. In the best of all possible worlds, in my humble opinion, Jim can counteract it if he wants to. That's okay. If the employer had all the time they needed, and that's where Jim comes in one regard, and they would use their network, they would most desire to hire someone that they know, like, and trust, or is referred to them by someone they know, like, and trust. So they would like to hire through networking, most definitely. However, they may not have enough time, so they need a recruiter, or they may not be good at leveraging their network or spend the energy to do it. And that's when they definitely need a recruiter in that regard. So I would say, ideally, most people would like to hire from a warm referral that comes with a reputation that's backed up by somebody that they trust. And in the case of Jim, he's the person they trust to bring him the right person. You have any comments about that, Jim?
To your point, 80 to 85% of jobs are gained through networking, 5% probably through executive recruiters. You know, a lot of those are confidential searches. And then the balance is, you know, through responding to, you know, job boards and all. I think everybody knows that if you've got good employees, typically good people know other good people and hang out with good people. So if you've got an internal referral, you know, that's incredibly powerful. People, you know, typically go to the front of the line. You know, unless there's some other issues that the company is trying to achieve. That, but still, you're far better off if you have a contact internally that can promote you than you know, just sending in a cold resume or something or other.
So my level 11 on here, and I actually now call it 12 shades of a referral. I keep refining this, but my 11 is the referrer provides you a strong in-person testimonial on a 3-way call. They tell the person why they should be talking to you. They explain why they should consider interviewing you or hiring you for a job they have. That's a level 11. I'm literally going to say, Bob, here's why you should talk to Ken, because Ken is the social media marketing guru. He's been doing it as a consultant, but if you could get him to give up his consultancy and come to work for you, you got a guy who's been doing it for multiple companies. He knows. I'm sitting here pitching why Bob should consider interviewing Ken for an open job he has. That's an 11. Now, you aren't going to get a lot of those, but the closer you get to that, the better off you are. Any other questions or comments?
Hey, Richard, I'll ask you one, maybe a two-part one. The first one is that when you make this top 20 list, and I guess I've thought about who those people are, but maybe it would be wise to go ahead and write them down like you suggest. I've typically have defaulted to sending emails or LinkedIn requests to have those conversations. And I'm wondering if you would say, you know, that's a mistake. You need to get a phone number if you don't have one and make the call. The reason I hesitate to do that in a lot of situations, so that's what the second part is, I have this hesitancy for higher level executives to contact them thinking there's no way they're going to want to take time to have that conversation in the first place. And I don't want to pin them down into a corner and make them kind of squirm. So how do you get around that?
Oh, well, so you're a marketing guy, and nothing against marketing, but you have to move into the sales mindset here. So you have to shift from marketing to sales. So the sales mindset is you have to engage them. So if they aren't responding properly to the less touchy-feely of the ways you're trying, then I would recommend you try to, you know, really put all that, I don't want to call it head trash. It sounds like I'm criticizing you. I don't mean it that way, but that stuff that's holding you back, like believing that they're so important or they're so busy they don't have time for you. If they know you, like you, and trust you, try to have the positive attitude that they will give you the time, because if they know you, like, and trust you, they'll give you the time, and then they'll potentially give you good referrals. If they're not responding to you, Doug, then they are busy and you're just kind of noise in their day of emails and everything else. So worst case, then leave a voicemail if you don't get them, which is very likely. Hey, Ken, this is Doug. I really would like to talk with you. It's been a long time. I need to catch up, and I have some business stuff I want to talk to you about. And I know you're busy, but I need you to carve out maybe 20 or 30 minutes on your schedule, sometime that's convenient for you. It could even be on the weekend. And could you please call me back or email me, richard@richardkirby.net or 770-366-5875, and let's get something on the calendar. I'd really appreciate it. Then you find out whether or not they're really on your top 20 list, because if they aren't returning your calls or responding, then they may know you and they may trust you, but maybe they don't like you, or maybe they know you and like you but don't trust you, or something's or they're just not a giver. As Donna mentioned earlier, they're not a giver, so they're not going to give.
Yeah, Brent, as I kind of understood that part of your question is essentially you're talking about a cold call. And it's always best if you've got somebody to refer you in, or somebody that you can at least use their name. But and the problem nowadays is, you know, telephones have really become a time management device. So people don't necessarily take calls as much as they let them go into voicemail, and then they decide, you know, who they're going to talk to and who they're not going to talk to and when they're going to talk to them. So
okay, well, I missed the point then. If that was a cold call, then yeah, you're not getting properly introduced so that person will respond to you.
No, it wasn't really a cold call, guys, but it, you know, I could give you an example of somebody at Cargill. I actually went to Cargill graduate school with the guy, but he's a VP, and, you know, I've gotten one email response out of in the last 6 months, and can't seem to get beyond that. So as an example.
Yeah, if it's somebody you went to grad school with and you think they're on your top 20 list, then yeah, I would try to engage them, either get them on the phone, or if you can't get them on the phone, at least leave them a voicemail, and then you have a chance to give a compelling marketing message of why you want to talk to them. And then they'll make a decision, yes or no. You kind of put them on the hot seat. to respond or not.
Sure.
You know, the other point that I would make is that you ought to turn that contact list into a mailing list. And people, you know, have a lot of success by, you know, just checking in with their network via email, you know, every 3 or 4 weeks or so. And just to say, hey, you know, I'm still in the market. This kind of progress I've had some interviews. There's something in the process, but I still want to just stay top of mind with you. So if you hear of anything that, you know, fits my needs and describe those, then, you know, there's a good likelihood of somebody that may not have followed up with you that you've tried to get in contact with that knows of something and that will come to life all of a sudden for you. So that's a really powerful tool to further, I mean, continue to engage your network, but also to, you know, improve your success with your network.
So I know we're probably about out of town, so I want to wrap up with one key point here that there's nuance, there's a lot of nuances, and the nuances aren't in the presentation. Obviously, we don't have enough time for that. But one thing I want to share with you is the idea that when you talk about givers and takers, you're out there, you're looking for a job or you're looking for a consulting gig. Don't become, I call it, don't be a slam dunk networker, or don't be a center court 3-point shot networker. I call it slam dunk, but it's really 3 points. You know, you can sit at the center court on a basketball and throw basketballs and eventually you'll make one. But if you're like me or an amateur, it may take you 40 or 50 shots, okay? If you go into every networking session with the assumption that your goal is to find a job interview or get a consulting client, you're sort of putting so much pressure on that typically sometimes people will shut down. Hey, I'm getting the feeling you're trying to get me to hire you, and I can't hire you. I don't have a job for you, or we don't need a consultant like you. So you really need to get out of the mode of trying to do the center court shot on every networking. You need to think of networking as a progression of conversations and get a good introduction or referral to your next conversation. And when you do that, you will naturally fall over, trip upon jobs and contacts and consulting gigs that you never knew were out there. So don't be a center court shot kind of networking person looking for the 3-pointer every time. That's it for me. I do appreciate y'all. I hope y'all have gone away with some useful idea. If you only have 2 or 3 things to change in your networking, it'll make you better. Thank you for having me.
Richard, as always, great presentation. Well, if there's nothing else, look forward to seeing you all at the March meeting, which will feature Kelly Trim, who you all heard this morning praising Richard to the hilt. She'll be talking about how to use LinkedIn to really facilitate your job search. So I think that'll be a great presentation. So thanks again, everybody. Great seeing you all. If you don't have my contact information, you will as soon as I send you the thank you. I'm here to talk to you as well if you're interested in using freelance consulting as a bridge strategy to a new job or a new career. I'd be happy to talk to you about that, as well as putting you on my mailing list for search assignments as they come up, keep you abreast of what's going on in my world. And by the way, things are picking up quite a bit